All right, so now I have this blank document here. We're going to bring these three images in to start up this particular exercise. So there's a lot of different ways you can bring stuff into Photoshop. For example, and each person kind of has their favorite way of doing it. We can go into Photoshop here and go File, Open, and open them up and bring them straight, straight into open the files themselves directly. So if I hit File, Open, navigate to wherever the files are kept. In this case, the three files here, the frame, the crown, and the cat. We can open these up. Now, whenever you open up multiple files in Photoshop, it opens them up as tabs here. Now, the reason we didn't really address this in the last assignment is because it can get a little confusing for some beginning users of Photoshop. You can actually tear these tabs off. They will float as objects. You can actually drag and drop them back in, and they'll become tabs again. So if you open up through the File menu, it'll open these objects up as other tabs. This is actually the way I like doing it personally, but I'll come back to that later. If you drag and drop, so I'm going to go to my untitled one here, which is going to be the actual canvas. If you drag and drop these, let's say I drag and drop the crown in this case, in here, this will also work, but it does it slightly differently. What it has done is it's created this kind of square here, and it has an image here of a crown, which is what the file is. But this image can be sized right now and messed with, and it can only be, it starts off by being uniformly scaled, and holding down Shift is non-uniform scale. But we can hit return and commit this. Now, what this is, without getting into too crazy detail, this is what's called a smart object. I'm going to hit return and commit this. And you'll see in layers, we're kind of starting out layers, this layer looks slightly different. This little icon in the bottom right of this layer denotes the smart object. Now, there's a whole lecture we can have on this. They're really great for, like I said, if you're doing like magazines and you want an image in there and you want to connect the image and maybe you go update the image later, like actually edit the file, this would automatically connect those things together. So it's very powerful. The reason we're not using these is because, and there's nothing wrong with them, it's just certain tools don't work with smart objects. And we could convert this to a rasterized image. So if you want to bring them in as smart objects, that's fine, but you have to do one additional step to be able to do the things that I'm going to be showing you. You have to right click on a layer and go to rasterize layer, I'm sorry. So this converts it to the layers that we did in the previous project, how they would work. Otherwise, you can do certain things like you saw me through the transform tool, which was how it came in by default, but certain things you can't do. Just be mindful, if you bring them in like that, you have to rasterize them at some point. You'll know because you're going to try to do something and say it won't do it. So what I like to do in this assignment is I like to open them all as tabs, and I'm going to go back and do the other one again. And then you saw me drag this off. Then click and hold on this with the move tool. Again, the move tool is the very first tool up here, so make sure you're on the move tool. Move and drag this into your canvas, whatever is going to be your base layer. And you can see that this is actually pretty small for me, depending on what size image you pick. If you did let's say if you did a web version of this would be bigger. So this is pixel accurate. So you might have varied results depending on what file size your canvas one is. And I close that other one because I don't need it anymore. So if you did a web background, this would probably be a much bigger image. And that's okay. You can size these up and down as you do the assignment. So it's not that big of a deal. You don't want to go too far, but that's a different discussion. I'm going to open up these other two. And again, all I'm doing is a third way is I'm dragging these images up here on this tab bar. Or if you have a hard time with that, again, you can just go File, Open, and then File, Open here. Cat, in this case. You can see them open different tabs. And I'm just going to drag these off real quick. Drag and drop the cat right here. And I'm going to close the cat. Now this way is a little more tedious, but it's good practice, I think, personally. And you don't have to worry about smart objects. And again, once you've dragged and dropped them into your actual canvas file, you don't need those are the original files anymore. You can close them. So last project was all about learning layers. So hopefully those lessons really stayed in your mind here, because we're going to be doing a lot of, well, not a lot, but manipulating layers in this project, as well as introducing you to some more selection tools and some, basic editing here. So we have 3 layers here. We have a crown, we have a cat, and we have a frame. Now, the order does matter here. And again, it renders from top down. So this topmost layer is what's going to be on top. So if I move this crown over here, you can see that this crown is covering it up. And what's happening here is technically this crown has some background white color in it. We have to get rid of that. Same with, possibly same with the cat, and possibly the same with the crown. So we can see that. I also want to make these images bigger, because my particular file background is kind of small. And we've already talked about that one, thankfully. That one, hopefully you guys remember, is we can select these layers one at a time, or technically all at once. You can do them all at once. And we're going to use the transform tool to make them bigger. So I'm going to do these one at a time just for repetition. And I'm going to turn these other ones off that I'm not doing. And again, the eyeball here is the how you turn things on and off. So I'm going to take this frame here, and I'm going to hit Control T, and I just have this layer selected, nothing else. I didn't make any selections. And again, if you accidentally have something selected, just make sure you hit Control D. Control D is deselect, or you can go through the menu and do deselect. Mine's grayed out because there's nothing currently selected. All right, so if I hit Control T on here, so I'm on that layer, you'll get the transform manipulators. And I'm just going to scale this up. I'm just arbitrarily scaling this up. I'm not really too concerned about the size right now. And Photoshop is destructive, which means that you are losing pixel quality the more you scale up. But Photoshop has gotten pretty good over the years of doing this. So like, there isn't a hard rule, but you can generally go like twice the size or maybe half the size of an original image without experiencing too much loss of quality. And then after that, there is filters, which we will get into later in these lessons, that can help, not completely reduce, help keep some of your quality. So all right, so there's my frame. And if you want to be really organized, we can double click on the words of the layer to rename these, because I don't plan on doing a lot of collapsing here. So like I said last time, I don't generally name these until the very end, because if I start collapsing them, then the names get lost. In this case, this particular demo is great for if you want to practice naming. You can double click on layer 1 here, and again, it has to be the words, not over here or on the image. It has to be on the words. Double click here. We can name this. I'm just going to call it, we can call it whatever you like. I'm going to call it frame. So it's just, something to practice here. All right. And then I'm going to go ahead and leave that on just so I can use it as a reference. Then I'm going to go ahead and select the cat. All right. And I'm going to make this cat relatively bigger. And I can come back and do this in multiple stages too, but I'm just going to eyeball the cat by clicking on that layer, and I'm going to hit Control T. And I'm going to put the cat eventually in here. And we could probably move this to start that, but I'm going to do something like that and hit enter. Now, of course, unfortunately, because there's a white background on this image, I can't see that. Now I could cut this, I could jump ahead and cut this out, but I'm not going to do that yet. I'm just going to scale it up a little bit bigger. And like I said, I can adjust it again later. One last one. I'm going to make the crown a little bigger. Control T. And I'm just going to make this a bit bigger as well. And like I said, I'll probably come back and do, adjust them again. Just want to get them all bigger, so hopefully you can see them better in the thumbnails preview on the right-hand side here. Okay, so now we're at the part where you can do all kinds of things. There's more than one way to tackle this by far. The first thing I'm going to do is, not because there's anything wrong with it, but these all have white backgrounds to them and it's making it hard to see. So one trick I like to do is I like to make the background layer a different color, and even if it's just temporary, a different color than all these other ones. Generally, like I said, when you see things on the internet, sometimes they're transparent, but if they're not transparent, a lot of times they have white backgrounds. They can be anything really, but they seem to be white backgrounds, or sometimes they do gradients. I'm gonna make this background color some other color. What I tend to do is go for like a grayish color. So all I'm gonna do is my color picker is pick gray. Now again, if you don't have your color picker open, you can go to Windows, Color, or the quick key is F6. So I'm gonna pick that color. It doesn't matter what gray, I tend to pick a gray, and this is just me. You can make it bright pink, you can make it purple, blues, whatever you want. Just make it something different than white, and make it something different than black. Because typically when you bring in images, that's the most common you see. And I'm going to fill this background with that color. I'm going to go ahead and use my quick key again, shift backspace to do that. And again, it brings up the fill command. And also remember, you have to be on the background layer. And then I'm going to go ahead and select foreground color. I'm going to double check. Yes, that's where I put the gray. And hit OK. And now it's a lot easier to see the bounds of the white borders here that from these images that you're using as your starting reference here. So I have this frame here that I need to get rid of this white here. So there's a lot of selection tools in Photoshop. We touched on just a few of them in the last lecture with the painting assignment, where we talked about rectangular selections and elliptical selections, which again you can get to by the M key. These will kind of work for maybe the inside here. Oh, not the elliptical one. Switches to the rectangular one. We can kind of get this to work, but not really. You probably could, but it's not worth our time. I believe we also talked about the lasso tool. I don't actually, maybe we didn't. But I'm going to talk about it now. The lasso selection tool is a selection tool that you click on. Here it's the next one down. It's the L key. And how this one works is you draw a line, and wherever you let go, it's going to connect. And then you can make selections in this way. Again, to deselect a selection is Control D. And the one you have to be careful about this is you don't do weird shapes like this, because when it draws that straight line, it's going to draw straight across, and it's going to cut these all in half. We have a selection here, selection here, selection here, selection here. It looks weird. I do talk about this in another lecture, not the last lecture, but one of the previous lectures before that, quite heavily. So you can refer back to that as well. But this tool could get the job done for us, but honestly, it's going to be a lot of work to sit here and come in here and trace this. And if you make a mistake, then you can add and take away from the selections as well, but it's not worth their time. So this tool is probably not going to work either. The next tool down, which is technically by default, you have something called the quick selection tool, but the fourth tool down right here, this is probably what you guys have, the quick selection tool, is this one we could use. Now, I love these little animated tooltips that Adobe has added here. They're great for selecting images. This is great for something that's a little more complicated. Personally, when you're dealing with really simplified silhouettes here, where there's a very hard transition of color or contrast, such as this white, I find it easier to actually go to the Magic Wand tool, which is the third one on this list. And again, if you click and hold on these toolbar things here, you can see what's in there. Or if you know the quick key, again, in this case it's W, you can use Shift W to switch between these. So again, Shift W, Shift W, Shift W. You can see I'm toggling between these. That's Object Selection tool. This is Quick Selection tool, and this is Magic Wand tool. Now the Object Selection tool probably would work as well, but I'm going to go ahead and just use the Magic Wand tool for right now, and we'll talk about the other ones later. So the magic wand tool, how this works, it is a selection tool that selects based on what you click on, and it uses the tolerance and the properties to determine how far it goes. So in this case, if I click on the white here, I just hover my mouse over the white and just left click on the white here, it's going to grab all the white pixels or near white pixels that are touching, that are contiguous, that are next to each other. If you turn that little checkbox off here, it will grab everything in the entire document or start on this layer, but I tend to leave this on. So you can see as I click here, it's going to grab all the white pixels around here. Now, that's fine. We can hit delete now, backspace now, or we can also add to the selection or take away from the selection by using our shift keys to add to a selection or our control key to take away. So if we wanted to get rid of this one in the middle as well at the same time, I can hold down shift with the magic wand tool and click in the middle here and select this. So I have white pixels all around the outer edge here, and I have white pixels in here as well. Now, there might be some little artifacts that get left behind, but I've got most of it. If your tolerance is set to a low percentage, you might have a harder time. Maybe if it's like set to 2, I can't remember what the default is. It probably would be fine, but just let's see. Okay, yeah, it wasn't that great. So you can see if I had this tolerance set to 2, it doesn't grab as much because really, if we were to really look at this file closely, because it's not the highest resolution, there's artifacts of just slightly different color in there. The tolerance is so low that it's not selecting much. So this kind of method, you want a high tolerance. You know, like I said, it was on 20 before. I'm going to Control D to select. And I'm going to click here, and you can see I grabbed all of that white pixels. If you're grabbing too much, maybe there's, maybe not in this particular image, but maybe in another one, maybe you have something that's like a sky gradient, you want like to keep something, you could turn it down. So you can play with that tolerance to try to find that sweet spot where you need to be. So I'm going to hold down Shift again and grab the middle part. You can see I have the outside and inside selected, and I'm just going to straight up hit backspace and delete these pixels, and you can see they go away. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit Control D, and you can see I have my frame all by itself, no more of the white pixels around the area here. And again, Control D is deselect. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the cat. Now we can kind of, a lot easier to see what's going on. We got the cat here, and we got the frame back there, and we could come in here and try to magic wand the cat. So you can see it, and again, I'm zooming in with Control Plus and zooming out with Control Minus. So if I hit Control Plus and zoom in on this cat, if you look at the cat, it has all these little, little fur and whiskers. You could magic wand this. However, there are tools for this, but magic wand isn't going to do a good job on this first off, and the other tools are, they're a little more complicated. There isn't really a reason to do this in this particular case, though, because you always should try to find these simple solutions. And in this case, just simply taking the cat and dragging it down beneath the frame will put the cat behind the frame, where we can use layers to our advantage. Now, if you wanted to get rid of that white and use something else back there, we would have to isolate that. But unfortunately, I will not be showing that in this particular video. But we could, there are tools, of course, for that. So what you can do is just, again, drag the cat layer, put it behind the frame, and this is, you'll have the white background inside the picture frame. Now, if it goes beyond the picture frame, you have two choices. Either you can transform the cat smaller, so Control T, and drag this down, which I don't think is going to look as good, but you could do that. So I'm going to hit Escape to cancel this. Or you can also hit, oh no, 1 second, people. There we go. You can also hit use the marquee tool to cut out some extra pixels. So we don't need this to be so precise. So if I come in here and grab this marquee tool, which we talked about in the last lecture heavily, and just select, we got a big area here of this frame. We don't have to be too precise. We can just kind of, okay, I'm going to take the path from here to here. And that's what we want to keep. So we want everything away from the outside. So if I delete this, unfortunately, I delete the cat. That's the exact opposite of what we want. I'm going to Control Z that. We want to invert this selection. So we're selecting what we want to keep in this particular example. We want to invert the selection. And to do that, the quick key, I believe, is Control-Shift-I. Or you can go up to Select, Inverse. Yes, it is Control-Shift-I. So you go Control-Shift-I, and what will happen, I'm going to hit Escape. Oh, gotta stop hitting that. If I hit Control-Shift-I, what will happen instead is it'll inverse the selection here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, just a little bit closer so you can see it. And again, I'm about to hit it here, Control-Shift-I. You can see that it adds a selection around here and here. So this is kind of like, it's denoting that it's selected everything outside what we originally had selected. And the best way to test this is, of course, hit the backspace key, and if it messes up or like you delete the cat again, just undo with Control-Z and try again. Again, so marquee, so M tool, drag a box around the cat loosely, then Control-Shift-I, or if you want to go through the menus, it's Select, Inverse. And then once you have the inverted, backspace. And there's our cat. I'm going to go ahead and Control-D this to deselect. And if you want to make the cat smaller, that's fine. In my case, I can only go so far down because I deleted a bunch of my border. But I'll make the cat a little bit smaller. Drag it down. I can go back and paint some in. In fact, I might do that. If you want to add a little bit of character in here, maybe rotate it a bit or do something like that, you can. Remember to use the transform tool, again, Control-T. But we can also I'm going to turn my frame off here real quick. I'm going to turn my frame off so I can use the cat here. And I'm going to hit Control-T. And if you hover your mouse around the outside corner, you can see how it turns into the curvy arrows, which will allow you to rotate, as opposed to if you're right on the edge here, you can just straight up transform the size. If I rotate this a little bit, and I only turned off the frame so it was easier to see these arrows, I can totally leave the frame on to do this. That. I'm going to Control-T, and then drag this a little bit, and then make this a little bit bigger. And I'm just going to rotate this a bit here, a little bit more, and then hit Enter. All right, so we have that going on. Now, if I go ahead and turn on the last thing here, maybe this crown here, turn on the crown, we got the crown right there. And the same thing, the crown is way too big, it has all this white pixels around it, but thankfully there's a nice clear edge here. We can magic wand this, select this, and delete this, and then deselect it. And once you have all those white pixels gone, you can bring this in here and rotate this as well and put this on here. So this is really simplistic image manipulation, but we all got to start somewhere. I'm going to put the crown on there. If you want to put it on one ear, you can totally do that as well. Now, if you want to change the size of your overall image here, maybe I want to crop a little bit of this, you can. And again, the crop tool is the C key. Mine currently has a set size up here from a previous lecture. If I just delete this, just delete those things there, you can change the cropping here and whatever you want. So like I said before, I made it horizontal. If you wanted to make this more vertical image, or maybe not so much, you can drag these bars around, get the C key, and we can go ahead and When you're happy with the edges, you can go ahead and crop and hit return to crop the tool. Sometimes you have to hit it twice because the first one commits the top properties, and then you see I crop this object. All right, so there is our cat on frame here. Again, a very simplistic exercise. What I would recommend that you do in addition to this is I used a gray background. I'm not going to actually put a background here, but I would advise that you find a background. If you want to actually hang it on a wall, put it in a room, that'd be great. And you guys can do that as well. Really spice it up. The one other thing I'm going to talk about, I might be diving too deep, but I kind of feel like this is a great chance to show you something and hopefully get it out of your system, is I'm going to talk about layer effects. Layer effects, what they do is they actually they can do a lot of things. But one thing you can do that might be convenient here is do a drop shadow. So if I double click on the frame here, and again, I used the example, I renamed this one where I clicked on the words and I said, don't click anywhere else because it will do something different. Now is the time where it's going to do something different. So if I just double click anywhere but the word here, we're going to bring up something called layer effects. Try again, and then hit escape again. There we go. So there it went. Let me try that again just to make sure that is working. So I'm going to double click on layer here. There it goes. Layer styles. I'm sorry, that's what it's called. So if I change layer styles here, I can come in here and there's a lot of things we can do here. So under layer styles, we can add a bevel, for example. I'm not going to go through all these, but if I add a bevel, we can bevel it. I don't think it's going to look too great on this one. A stroke can be kind of interesting, and how you turn these things on or off is the little checkbox right here. There's a lot of settings to play with. I will talk about these in future lectures. I just don't want to, because we can eat up a lot of time in this lecture doing this. So if I hit stroke here, for example, I can add a line. I click on the word here. I can actually mess with the properties, make the line thicker. You can see it's doing the inside and outside because if this is a completed layer. I can click on the color swatch here, change the color. If you want to mess with this, you can totally mess with this. Add some lines there. I'm not going to do this either. I'm just showing you. But the one I wanted to show you out of these, again, feel free to play with these, have fun with them. This would be a great assignment to actually, to kind of try these on because it's not that complicated of an assignment. But the one I really wanted to show you guys was drop shadow. So if we click on drop shadow, it fakes a drop shadow. So I'm going to turn it on and then click on it in the settings. We can have the color of the drop shadow be any color. We can determine the angle of the drop shadow right here. We determine the opacity. If I go really high, it's not going to look good, but we can, well, it doesn't look that bad, but we can do that. It's solid black now. We determine the distance, how far it sticks off from the thing. The spread is how blurry it is, basically. It has a zero spread. It's a soft, blurry shadow. It has 100% spread. It's a hard shadow. And size is just how big that shadow is. So these particular things all control different aspects of it, and it's really up to you what you want to do with these. As you can see, I kind of tone them a bit way down myself. So there we go. You can see something like that. And I can just click OK when I'm happy with it. Now the great thing about these layer effects is these are non-destructive actually, unless you flatten or merge the layer. These are non-destructive. We can come back in here and double click on this again to activate and manipulate those particular layer effects. So if you want to change them or turn them off, you can, or you can just straight up drag this little FX right here into the trash can. That will completely delete them. Or if for some reason, I don't think this will look good, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway, is if you wanted to copy a layer effect from one layer to another, you can do that. And we talked about how if you hold down Alt, when you drag something in Photoshop, it will make copies of things. And the same thing's true for layer effects. So if I grab this little FX, think of that as the actual layer effect, and drag and drop it on layer 3 in my case, which is the crown, I will add the layer effect to the crown. Again, I don't think it looks particularly good here, but it's okay. And then if you want to go in and change change its settings, after, you can. They're totally independent of each other. So you can change them. So if I want to come in here and double click on this one and mess with the drop shadow settings, I can do that. You don't have to have the exact same ones. Okay, so we talked about how to create new layers, or bring files into Photoshop. We talked about how to isolate them using the magic wand tool, inverting layers, deleting things, transform tool. We talked a little bit about layer effects, and we talked about naming things as well. So all good tips to keep your files organized. And there you have it: the cat, the crown, and the frame here all in one piece. And that pretty much concludes this lecture. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. And again, see what you can do with this background, maybe add something to spice it up a bit and have fun with this. This is a great assignment to really just kind of try things if you're new with Photoshop. All right. So try that out, and then we'll get started on the next one.